Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome. Thank you for joining us today for this important conversation on the AI adoption gap, why employees aren't using the AI tools you bought. I'm Srishti and I'll be your host for today's session. Over the last few years, AI has moved from experimentation to expectations. Boards are asking about it, leaders are funding it, teams are piloting it. And yet, despite organizations investing heavily in AI tools, and platforms, actual usage across employers often tells a very different story. Many companies have already purchased AI tools, they have rolled them across teams, they have announced teams internally as a part of their digital transformation, and yet adoption remains surprisingly low. Employees may try the tools once or twice, some teams ignore them altogether, and leaders are left wondering why the expected productivity and ROI never fully materialize. Today's session is not about which AI tool to buy, it's about why employees often don't adopt the tools organizations have already invested in, and what needs to change for AI to become a part of everyday work. At Adoptify AI, we work closely with organizations that are excited about potential of AI but are struggling to turn tool availability into real employee adoption. What we have consistently observed is AI adoption isn't just a technology rollout, it's a behavior change challenge. And without the right mindset, enablement, and organizational alignment, even the most powerful AI tools can sit unused. Today, we'll explore that, and to guide us through this discussion, we are joined by two leaders who bring deep experience in AI strategy, technology, and real-world adoption. Joining us first is Mr. Chintan Dave, General Manager and Certification Director at Adoptify AI, who brings a deep technology and systems thinking perspective to the AI transformation journey. Chintan has spent years working across emerging technologies and enterprise environments, helping organizations design AI strategies that are robust, scalable, and future ready. His works align closely with the idea that sustainable AI adoption requires more than simply introducing new tools. It requires thoughtful integration into workflows, processes, and the broader organizational culture. In today's session, Chintal will share insights into why employees often struggle to integrate AI tools in their daily work and what organizations can do to close the gap between AI investment and real usage. Next, I am pleased to welcome Rahul Srivastav, Strategy Director at Adoptify AI. Rahul brings over 8 years of experience in the edtech industry, working across strategy and operations, program management, growth, and business development. Over the years, he has played a key role in multiple 0 to 1 initiatives, helping organizations launch and scale impactful programs from the ground up. What makes Rahul's perspective particularly valuable for today's conversation is his focus on bridging strategy with execution, ensuring that ambitious technology initiatives translate into real adoption and measurable outcomes. Rahul is passionate about creating scalable impact by balancing precision with speed of execution, and his work focuses on helping organizations build practical pathways for technology adoption across teams. Rahul and Chintan, without a further ado, over to you.
Thank you for a great introduction on a Friday. That seems to be a little more motivating now for me to take it forward. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to each and every one of you who are attending this particular session. I know Friday can get a little mentally checked out. It can either be wrapping off of the week, but I really respect the fact that you're giving your next 60 minutes to us. I would quickly tell you what we are going to cover in these 60 minutes so that everyone is aligned and you have a complete handbook of what is going to come next. So, first things first, we will unpack why AI adoption fails even after heavy investments. We are going to talk about what is going to be a clear pathway or a clear adoption framework or an adoption journey that needs to be in position to ensure that enterprise-wise adoption from AI tools perspective is hand-holded and it is governed in the right direction. Third, we will tell you how Adoptify help measure, scale, and actually realize the ROI on the tools that you have already invested. Very categorically, we will keep the complete instance near to Copilot right now. And then if you guys have any questions, anything across, feel free to write it on the chat. Welcome to the webinar. So, of course, the topic of the webinar is why employees aren't using the AI tools that you have bought. I think before we even move forward with this particular topic, Chintan, if you can move to the next slide, I would ask everyone to write in the chat where they are in their journey at the moment. That becomes very imperative and very clinical in terms of understanding where you are in your journey. So, if you can just go on to the first slide of it, I think that is where I would want people to write in the chat. Have you scaled in AI? Have you, you know, have you, in case if I have to share, Chintan, shall I share the screen? I think. Sure, sure, sure. No problem. Yeah. So, everyone, the entire objective of having this activity with all of you is to understand the participants' journey in AI adoption right now. And if you could quickly write it in the chat as soon as Chintan showcases it, I think it will be great for you to write it in the chat. Where are you? It might be whether you are, um, you have deployed the Copilot, but the usage is low. Some teams use it, but you do not have scaled it yet. You are still seeing the value, but struggling to measure the Copilot usage. Copilot is one of the examples. I'm just taking it as a placeholder. Or you do not have a visibility on the utilization perspective. If you can write it on the chat, I'm again repeating it for everyone to have a very nuanced understanding of it. It can be we have deployed Copilot, but the usage is low. It can be a visibility issue that you do not know whether the teams are actually using it or not, or some teams use it and some team does not. So you might be in a confusion of whether it has to be department wide scaling or it has to be enterprise wide scaling. And we are seeing value, but you are unable to measure it. So there is a lot of ambiguity around the measurement of the ROI. So if you can start writing in the chat, I think I have started getting a lot of messages on the chat. There are four people who have written it. We have been using AI to accelerate software development. Great. Thanks. Okay. We have not yet started. We are still discovering. Then we have someone saying, okay, that's exactly what we'll cover. Great. So I think people have. So what just I mentioned was in this particular slide where I want all of you to write it and maybe chat with us. I think most of the people are not inclined towards only option A, B, C, D. That is the best part, that we were expecting a spread across it. So it's not the problem that people are just facing in a concentrated way that only they are heavily deployed on AI tools, but they are not using it. It is across. So of course, that is what the entire objective was. So then, if you can just go on to the first slide of it, I just want to now take back everyone to the first slide, which is where you have already bought the licenses, but you did not really, buy the adoption. So from a fact perspective, it is very clear that 70% of the enterprise Copilot licenses go underutilized in the first 90 days. That's because you don't know the use case of Copilot. You do not know, maybe your people are not trained enough to use Copilot, maybe because you have not selected the right cohort to pilot the Copilot. So there can be multiple use problem statements. These are the top three problem statements when we interact with a lot of organizations for their adoption problems. This is what we have come across. So I just wanted to rate these three problems in the first Venn diagram that you see right now. Only 1 in 3 leaders say that they have the visibility. Again, visibility becomes a little more concerning for the people in terms of not just how they measure the success of the deployment, but it is also about whether the AI readiness or the people readiness across the organization is actually being translated into a value or not. Then you see the third Venn diagram, which says that most productivity gains takes about 6 to 12 months to materialize without a structured adoption plan. This is something that becomes a very, very important aspect when I have personally spoken to a lot of organizations across different industries. You talk about real estate, you talk about healthcare, you talk about oil and gas, you talk about finance and banking. We have seen the most productivity gains has happened between 6 to 12 months, but there is no structured plan of adoption. Randomly, people are taking the training, they are bringing the change management, they are doing program management, they are enforcing through leaders, but there is no adoption framework. And that's where Adoptify AI has synced everything in one place, where we develop a complete adoption framework with you, be it data readiness, readiness, AI readiness, people readiness, or maybe infrastructure readiness. So that's where we come handy. We'll explain it to you how that works. But on a high level, these are the three major problems that we have been able to identify when we speak to a lot of enterprises. If you can, Chintan, slightly go on to the third slide of it. I mean, the first and second is completed. I want to go on to the third slide where it's not a Copilot problem. On again, I'm repeating it. Copilot is a placeholder here. It's not a tool problem. It's an adoption problem. So we have understood workflow gap. We have understood people do not really know the use case where they can actually fix. I'm just giving a very small example, Chintan. You would agree to this. We had a problem with one of our client who had purchased 5,000 Copilot licenses, and they have a strength of 2,000 sales employees. And they did not even know about the fact that there is a sales Copilot that they were supposed to use. So it is license within license that they are supposed to know about, which they were not educated by maybe whoever they have purchased this particular license from. So that was one of the problems that we saw in last 3 to 4 conversations we had it, where we understood that when you actually make a purchase, it's not just a purchase to show the management about we are doing something about AI. It's more about building with AI, right? So you need to know the use case. You need to know where in the workflow you can automate using AI so that that can increase and improve your productivity, efficacy, and efficiency. If I talk about scaling failure, we have seen a lot, and this has been a problem in our organization as well. We are about 1,000 people in our organization. Back in 2021, we have seen that there have been isolated group of people working alongside, but there is no shared practices. There are no shared best practices across the domain, which has not really helped as an organization to really scale it up. And that's when we realize that it's very important that when you are doing a pilot or when you are doing any adoption, you have to share the best practices across, and it cannot be isolated. And that's where scale becomes, and processes, system thinking becomes very imperative and important. If I talk about visibility gap, I've already mentioned that visibility gap to management is again going to be very important aspect to understand, proactively take steps to increase and improve the adoption of any tool that you use. And of course, we all know governance is something AI has been questioned a lot about governance in the last 9 to 10 years. And we have seen that in Asia Pacific specifically, governments are taking a lot more complex steps to ensure that governance around AI is being fixed. I'm just talking about India as a region. We have DPDP Act. If I talk about Japan, they have their own act. So some of the things that are not really applicable in one country, it might be applicable in another country. So of course there are governance issues. Government is doing a lot to ensure that and I would say IT infrastructure teams of the companies are also taking steps to ensure that employees are using it in the safe environment where the data leakage, where integrity on the data is not going to be a bigger problem. So I think these are the four major issues that we try to solve through Adoptify, and that is what I wanted to convey to all of you. Chintan, if you can go on to the next slide, maybe I would like to now take them. This is a very small picture, a pictorial view of what I have personally analyzed and seen. I just don't want to talk a lot about on this slide, but very categorically, if you see, why system failures or why integration challenges and what happens when you do not, use it proactively and you don't utilize and maximize on what you have actually put in. This is the kind of conversations in the organization starts happening. So I think this is this is something which everyone can understand how the journey looks like for an organization that is setting themselves for a failure. So organization starts, with the fact that they want to adopt. The narrative is always about AI adoption, AI adoption, AI adoption. And once it starts kicking in, people do not use it. It does not then it does not become a question of whether the data is accurate, whether a model is hallucinating, whether model is drifting. It is all then becomes a backseat, but the entire objective is whether people are really using it or not. Because there's a lot of change in the workflow. There's a lot of change in the traditional way of operating, in the workflows, and that's where change management and program management becomes a very important thought in the organization for people to know why this is important and why we have already invested in this. So I think this is what I wanted to explain through this slide. If you can maybe Chetan move into the next slide, I would I would like to give everyone a clear path in terms of how a Adoptify really does it for the organizations and how we have done it for multiple organizations. The first question has always been, what is your use case? Because people bought a lot of things because they are in the zone of creating a narrative in the organization that we want to be AI first organization. We want to drive innovation through AI. We want to drive AI AI readiness through training our people. So there's a lot of pressure that goes from a CXO to a bottom line, but I would still say that there is no framework that needs to be positioned, and that's what we have realized over a period of time. The first thing that I would always see forward for is that what is your use case? Because in a the HR use case of AI in a manufacturing industry would be very different from a HR use case in an IT industry. So I think use case mapping become a very important tool, and that's where deployment and getting the foundations right is very important. Once that is done, then we move forward to activating people. As I rightly mentioned before as well, I'm not sure how many of you would agree with me, but if you can put it on the chat, I would be glad to see your responses. That the major problem of adoption is not just the infrastructure and the tools availability and the governance. It is actually the people who want to adopt it and they have to start using it. People are so much into ChatGPT that they feel that they should not be using ChatGPT. They should not be using Copilot because ChatGPT is very fast. It understands the context and all of that. But just to tell everyone, since we are very close to Microsoft, we work very in tandem with Microsoft people as well. And we have a lot of people working with us who are from Microsoft. We would like to tell you that Microsoft is now investing a lot of money to make Copilot independent of OpenAI. That's where the key would lie in, because you want to drive a sustainable business, you want to drive a sustainable systematic approach from adoption perspective. Your tool needs to be. So I'm just trying to tell everyone that at a very high level, tools are also activating themselves. They are also increasing and improving their efficacy and efficiency to drive adoption. So I think getting people started is not just change management. It has to be whether people are hands-on onto those tools or not. For being hands-on and measuring whether they are hands-on or not, that's where Adoptify comes into play, where we have partnered with multiple organizations, certification bodies. We have partnered with training companies, best training companies who can come train your employees, check the readiness through certification, and then they are ready to deploy and activate in that particular complete ecosystem of what we are working. Of course, when we deploy people, we do not want mass deployment because that can have a lot of problems at the end or at the back end, where your data leakage can happen. Anything and everything can happen, which can cause a lot of issues or damage to the organization from a branding perspective, from reputation perspective, or maybe from anything that is hazardous to the data integrity. So it's very important to go into the pilot phase, of course, which is very logical and no brainer that people start with a pilot of 50 odd people, 100 odd people, and then they try to see whether this pilot, where they select the buyer persona, they select the user persona. I think there is one of the participants in the chat who has written that we are using Copilot, or we are using tools to really reduce our load onto manual coding. I'm just assuming that you would be using Cursor AI, you would be using multiple tools to ensure that coding does not become now a job for people, because a lot of companies have now told that coding is no more going to be a real job. It is just going to be a plug and play model. So with that, what I wanted to say is that, of course, we start with a pilot. We start with our packages also that we have defined or for our users are in tandem to pilots, that you can start small, you see the result, and then you scale. Right. That's where then after you have some understanding on your use case, whether people adoption, AI data adoption, infrastructure availability is all in sync, and then you see that there is a result coming out. There is a 17%, 18%, 20% productivity increase in your productivity, and that's where you then put into scale. Now, when you put everything into scale, and that's where it becomes a little more challenging for everyone. Now, why we say that is because when you are doing a pilot, you might be thinking about having a very small cohort of people who are best in their jobs. So you know that if you put this to a best set of people, the benchmark would be the best. Then you try to, of course, put it to the set of people who are maybe not very good with it, maybe very good with it, and then your average benchmark becomes a little lower. And that's where your adoption and your scale comes and adoption framework comes in play. And that's where, Chintan, when you will be talking, I think Chintan is the CTO of our company. He has deep expertise in AI and blockchain. These are the two emerging technologies. He has built systems from scratch with us. He would be the right person to tell how adoption framework works. And in multiple organizations, when we have dealt with those organizations, we have seen that, the breakdown is not because of the pilot is not working or the pilot has worked. The breakdown is because there is no right adoption framework. So I think that's the key that we have developed, and that's the black box that we have developed for our clients, so that you just get to know that this is what you put into the black box and the output is just the productivity. If I talk about optimization, of course, optimization is a series of optimization is a part of the complete process right now. Because when we talk about optimization, it clearly means that you are doing something in the right direction and you're not doing something which needs right direction, and you keep on improving, you keep on checking the engagement rates, you keep on encashing the right value, and you keep on what is working out, you keep on scaling that. I think that's one of the very granular way of saying it. That oversimplifying, I am oversimplifying by saying this, but again, optimization in any channel is going to increase the efficiency of the system. It will also help us not to have higher turnaround time for things to react. So it'll optimization and being proactive through this series of optimization is going to be the key success factor. So these are the five major aspects that I really wanted to talk about, because the baseline of what we do at Adoptify is this. So that's pretty much that I wanted to talk about. I think, Chintan, if you go on to the next slide, I would be able to maybe you would be able to talk about the technicalities in terms of where they are, what happens next, what are the risks if you rush through these problems. I think that five stages that we have developed in our organizations for our customers will help them understand and relate better. Over to you, Chintan. I think you are cracking. Your voice is cracking. Urja, can you check if it's my voice or Chintan's voice, because I'm not able to hear Chintan.
No, I think Chintan is facing some network issues.
Is it better now?
Okay, it's better. It's better. Now I can hear you.
Sorry, guys, there's some issue with the connection. Okay. All right. So organizations have, like everybody is investing in AI first of all. So there is no question that will there be an investment in AI? The answer is yes. Now, what you are investing in AI is not directly proportional to the ROI that you will plan, right? And that's where the system is extremely important for any of the AI tool that you're deploying, including the Microsoft Copilot, right? So the technology is the one piece of it, like Rahul has mentioned, and then how you're driving the adoption with the smartest framework alive is the second piece of it. That means organizations are actually heavily investing in the AI tools, but many of them are not realizing the biggest part of the entire process gap is that technology will never be a problem, right? An adoption gap, a lack of visibility, an unclear ROI. These are the various factors which will actually drive the overall adoption that you are going to do. Now, to address this entire journey, each and every company, like the major fives, including the Microsoft, Amazon, Google, OpenAI, Cloud, you name them, which are enterprise grade ready, they have actually suggested multiple various framework which helps you solve the problem based their own understanding. What Adoptify AI is doing is actually helping you to move to the standard framework based on the various case studies we already implemented with our clients that we already work with for an AI adoption. Now, when you talk about the current stage, what you're technically doing is we're saying that, hey, we got the license. What we are going to do with the license? Right? Are these licenses going to add value? What typically the success metric would look like? Right? What is going to happen if one team is going to get benefited versus the other? Right? What's not clear that how we are going to scale this entire process? right? So the most important power word in an AI adoption is the word called impact, right? So you want to create an impact into a use cases or the workflows which will give you a maximum ROI, right? When you have a fancy tool in your hand as an organization and the people, they definitely want to play with it. But the most important part is that which workflows, which use cases, what teams are going to drive the maximum impact, and then you become a AI readiness company or an AI adopted company as well, right? So to do that, basically, one of the most important part is to understand how the human psychology works with any of the new technology, right? It's a psychological as well as technical acceptance model that we need to understand, right? So first, what you do is you start with one of the most important part is that you identify high value, repeatable problems that you want to solve, right? You don't want to rush into the things that hey, governance gaps will be there. How we are going to technically set it up. Like Rahul has likely mentioned, is the pilot of it. If you have a right pilot done, it will give us the confidence to deep dive into this entire process. Now, we have thousands of employees using the almost every AI tool out there. So far, we have tested more than 10,000 AI tools, guys. We are an AI readiness company. We could say that hey, tools are abundance, and that's where the problem starts. It's not about the tools, it's about the adoption strategy, adoption framework, and the structured adoption framework is what the problem everybody wants to solve, right? So first and most important stage, like you mentioned, that hey, you have a tool, but are you ready? The second and most important stage, if you can go to the next slide, Urja, is that hey, do you have the teams actually using it or not, right? How do we get teams to actually start using the tools, right? Irrespective of the Copilot, whether it is a Gemini, whether it is a Claude. And we had a couple of chats related to, we have a coding teams, we have a ops teams, we have a marketing teams. How these teams are going to utilize the Microsoft Copilot or any other AI tool, it has to be structurally. So to do that, what we need to do is one of the most important question we need to ask. Okay, so initially, the first and most important question that you need to ask is, who do I give my AI tool to first? Okay, the most important question is who. Then the next and most important question is where. Where can my organization get the most productivity gains? Now, people understand that the productivity is an automation only. No, the productivity is the impact of an automation that you want to drive. That means where can my organization get a most productivity gains, right? Third and most important question we would need to ask is how. How do I get my team having and running things quickly with the AI tools that we are having, right? And once you are clear with who, where, and how, one of the most important question is why. Why it is important to build the momentum. So pilot is actually going to drive the momentum into the conversation that we do. So if your pilot is right, you'll be able to scale those pilot to the next stage. That means you have a structured approach of doing a pilot, right? Now, once you are done with the who, where, how, and why, the most important question everybody is asking, hey, when I will start seeing the business results? Like, so when is my ROI coming, right? And then, like I used, the important question is an impact. What is the ways to measure this impact? Now, if an organization answers who, where, how, why, when, and what about the adoption journey, they will be able to scale from pilot to an actual production way much faster. As every other tool, AI is also a tool which needs to be driven structurally really, really well. Okay, so if you can move to the next slide. Now, when you decide it, right, when you start with the where, right, when you're starting about the where, one team is liking it, another team doesn't like it, right? Now, this should not be the classic case. If you are able to generate the adoption framework and the approach right, then it will become easy to scale some of the pilot projects that you have already done, right? So one of the most important part we need to do is select the high value use case is the extremely important point. Right now, when you say, how do I select the high value use case? You would need to know first of all, and for that, we need to have a clear visibility of where the tools are being used, right? So as an Adoptify AI, we deploy the dashboard to understand where you're actually using it, how they're actually using it, all the numbers of licenses that you have bought, are they really active, right? Where they're using, are they using for summarizing the meeting, are they using where? So where is the most important piece of the puzzle is to solve, and to answer it and keep it simple, selecting the most high value use case by role and department is extremely important. Now everybody will say, hey, is there any framework? The answer is yes. High value use case will be defined personally for your organization. The reason, every organization is trying to solve a different problem based on the domain and expertise and their business into, right? That means if you are in the healthcare, you may want to optimize some of the use cases would be completely different than the finance, than the insurance. So you would go to an assessment journey and team will send you the follow-up message with the assessment template. You would literally go to an assessment journey. Once you assess where you are, and there are also understanding that where you actually want to invest into a pilot use case. Selecting a pilot use case is going to be an extremely important, because that's what you're going to give you the nudge, push, and the alignment for the next and most important part. So once you are aligning it, you have got the context that, hey, where I'm going to use is, I know what my ROI would be predicted for, and actually we are starting the setup keeping end in mind about the ROI. And the most important part is, let's say, if we don't choose the right audience, right use case, if your pilot fails, your momentum will break. And AI use case is always about, adoption is all about the momentum that you bring into the organization. If you can move to the next slide, please. Now, once you have selected the use case, how is going to be a most important part? So how do we take what's working and roll it out? So the term called onboarding and engagement piece of, right? So some departments are using it, others are not using it, right? We want to grow wider, but the risk is super high. How do we do it? How do we do it? So we need to figure out a proper templatized adoption KPIs, which really figures it, right? So there is the standard framework, which as an Adoptify we are using, we call it Adopt OS. Okay, so it has a complete framework process where we are actually driving the adoption framework in a most structured way to the use case specific to the organization. So the most important part is the structure and framework, which is going to help us drive the the alignment. So once you have decided the how part of it, you will literally understand that once you decide where and how, you will be able to decide the number of champions that you are going to create within the process. That means you're actually creating the Copilot user or AI user community within your ecosystem itself. Those who are going to become your champions for the next steps. Those champions are basically your early adopters, and those will enhance this entire processes to the next level. Once you have your how clear, if you can go to the next slide, please. If you can go to the next slide, please. I think it's 1 second. Sorry for the technical difficulties, guys. Let me share it. There you go. Do you see my screen, guys? So as you see that if you are done and discussed with the how part of it, you will literally go and decide how your journey will organization will get stuck into, and then how you are going to actually move out of that stuck point. You have seen organization stuck, how you're going to roll it out. So how your ROI plan would look like. Rahul, do you want to take over?
Yeah, Chintan. Thank you so much. I mean, that was a great, you have taken us through the journey of all the 5 stages, how it looks like. I think we have talked about two things very importantly, the use cases versus what really drives the adoption. I think now we should talk about how an ideal framework or adoption looks like. I think without a guide and with a guide, I've just kept it very clean and clear that Copilot sits underutilized. Leaders fly blind. ROI is a just guesstimate. IT carries all the risk. I mean, IT teams are the one, or the infrastructure teams are the one. IT infrastructure teams that carries all the risk. So I think with a guide, that's where adoption or Adoptify AI comes into a lot more handy and a lot more as a handbook, or I would say a playbook of AI, or a playbook for AI, that we have cracked it for multiple organizations that we have worked alongside. So we have understood that adoption grows stage by stage. It's not an overnight journey that today you have bought some tools, you have done 5 different things to increase the adoption, and it will grow dramatically over a period of 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It takes time, of course. Real-time visibility into the usage is very important so that we can penetrate the user behavior. We can understand whether it is people readiness, either it is behavior readiness, either it is infrastructure, or either it is a problem with the tool in itself, right? The tool use case mapping is not correctly done. That's one of the reasons people are not using it. So real-time visibility adds a lot of value to what we do. ROI is again measured and proven. And then, of course, governance is monitored continuously. So these are four aspects that where you have seen where organizations get stuck. Now we are just talking about how they don't, if they don't get stuck in their journey, this is how it looks like, right? Now, if I want to really talk about, how this exactly works, we have developed multiple dashboards for people, for organizations, for leaders to have an understanding on their usage. Active users by department, department adoption trends, license utilization rate, productivity signals. So there are multiple proxies of productivity signals that can be plugged into, that can be factored into when we are creating a formula for productivity. And that is where you will be able to see all the leading indicators. A lot of time we have seen organizations, what they do is they keep lagging indicators. I'm just giving one example. If I'm using a tool today for sales or for marketing, and I'm waiting for after 2 months the sales will come in, and then I will see whether this has an impact or not, that is where you are putting wrong metrics in place when you are actually calculating the productivity. So while you're calculating productivity during your adoption, it is very important and imperative that you need to create a system in place wherein the productivity is a part of your early signs, or I would say, your matrix should be aligned where you will be able to see early indicators of productivity and not just waiting for revenue to come in to decide whether this tool is working for us or not. So this is how the dashboard usually looks like.
Rahul,
Yeah, yes, yes.
the most important part of these process we need to understand is that these metrics are industry standards that have been collected for various AI tools, starting from, let's say, they are into an, like, how do you want to do it? Let's say, so when you have the number of licenses, if the people are using it, you would say, hey, using it, the number is so high. So let's say I have a 99 licenses, 98 people are using it. Hey, my adoption rate is 98%. No, that's not the right way to measure the math, right? So, like Rahul has rightly mentioned, the utilization rate and productivity signals are extremely important when they are going to tie it back to the actual use case, right? So when they are tying back to an actual use cases is where you are going to measure the ROI in terms of, let's say, number of hours have been saved, or what we are actually trying to do with the XYZ use cases, which can be automated or it can trigger a specific workflow, which can actually save you do things much more faster than you are doing previously or effectively as well, right? Now imagine the use case such as you have multiple documentations going on, you have multiple meetings going on in the organization. All these can be clubbed as a small custom Copilot agents, or let's say custom agents, or a small Gemini agents as well, which can actually drastically reduce the time that you're investing before and after the meetings. And with that being said, I'll hand it over to you, Rahul, that the Copilot adoption actually is looking visible. Making it visible is extremely important. So you actually want to understand that what you're investing, you have a clear daily, weekly measurement of where the tools are being used for and what the tools are being used. Over to you, Rahul.
No, absolutely. I mean, very categorically, you have given a right example of, how it can actually get implemented and what are the challenges and how do we measure and overcome those challenges as well. So, very correctly pointed it out. Thank you. If we go on to the next slide, I think this slide, again, we have created dashboards. This is a sample dashboard for one of our clients, real estate client that we have created. But on a high level, if you see ROI calculation, time saved per user, user level analysis, department level comparison. Now, this is very, very high level. We are just showing it to you. This is not the exact productivity metric that we will be able to, or ROI calculation. We will be able to do it. We will be able to do it for your organization basis your use case, of course, as I pointed it out. And I think this is kind of visibility that we want to give it. So we have understood that visibility is one of the concerns while we are doing the adoption. That is one of the reasons we have that also one of the things clearly placed. So I just wanted to talk about how Adoptify bridges the gap. If you see there are three columns, what you have, the gap, what Adoptify adds. So Adoptify, I would say, sits across the entire journey. It does not tell you where you are. It helps you move forward stage by stage. And the best part is it helps you with clarity. It is not going to be a gray area that you have to take as something as a package, and then everything is going to be done by a team of Adoptify. It is going to be a very close collaboration between Adoptify team and, of course, with your organizations in tandem to all the nitty gritties that are involved with respect to how we want to adopt and how do we want to implement the use case. So the most important aspect that Adoptify adds right now, I would just to tell everyone, is to help give visibility and help them with quantifying the impact. Just not telling that the impact is there is an impact. Now, how do we measure the success of that impact? What is the definition of that impact? How do we give the visibility? How do we optimize that quantification of impact? Department wise, I can tell you that this department has gained 13% on a very high level, productivity impact 15%, 18%, 35%, 40%, depending upon the use case. Again, Chintan, if you can just go to the next slide, I just want to talk about the cost of adoption, because a lot of companies have already, yeah.
I just want to give a transition to Rahul by saying that he has rightly mentioned on the slide. See, we don't just tell you where you are, we show you how you get where you need to. So it's an extremely important point what you mentioned, Rahul. Yep.
So I think Adoptify ROI calculator is something that we have created. This is something which I've already talked about. I think we can go into the next slide. This is again a part of visibility that we add. How do we add it? What I actually wanted to talk about here is that AI adoption is not one size approach that fits for everyone. That's where industry specific adoption becomes a very important use case, where your one product cannot solve the problems that are very specific to a very specific industry. You need to customize, you need to really, really be on top of changing how the way AI is changing right now. I mean, if you see every day, I mean, in the last conversation we had, you told me that almost, every day there are 15 to 20 new tools that are coming up as an alternative and as an add-on to what already exists. So, it's very important to keep the pace with the AI as well. Just to give a little more understanding how a poor adoption can cost you, we have seen on a high level Copilot users, let's say, assuming it is 500 licenses, average time saved per user per week on a structured adoption perspective is going to be, let's say, 3.5 hours. Average hourly cost per employee is, assuming that cost is $45, annual recovery productivity becomes almost 4 million. Now, I'm just saying this is a very hypothetical number, but again, when I've put in this number, I've not put in this number very hypothetically. We have customers for whom we have already worked alongside, basis that I have put in one number. But again, I'm saying that even if this number is half, even if you're able to make an investment of, let's say, 0.5 million, and then you are able to see a productivity gain of 2 million, that's still a 75% increase in your net productivity. So on a very high level, if you don't go with a very structured framework in terms of adopting AI, your complete investment can actually cost you nil, zero. So I think it's very important for all the stakeholders who are available, who care about their organization, to really understand the narrative that we all want to remove people and put tools. It cannot be with, it is not that zero and one right now. You have to empower people, you have to empower your infrastructure, you have to empower your data, you have to have everything in place to ensure there is a clear understanding, demarcation of how we want to adopt AI basis your use case and basis your industry. So that's where I want to talk about in my next slide. I think, Chindan, if you can push to the next slide, where I think I want to talk about one is how our plans look like. This is something, since I have we have a account management team who can get back to you and they can tell you about the pricing and all. But I would just highly tell you these are the three packages that we offer today. One is an essential package, one is an acceleration package, and the other is enterprise transformation. Essentials help you understand if you are into a journey where you are exploring AI. Acceleration helps you where you are into your maybe pilot done or to be done stage. And enterprise transformation is where you have completed a certain cycle or you have adopted AI into a certain level in terms of certain departments, certain teams, and now you have to scale. So these are the three major plans that we plan to offer to our clients, and this is what we have been running through. Of course, what is the pricing for the plan, what is the timeline for the plan, how to execute this. We will have our sales team connect with you after this on a one-on-one call, and they will be able to explain, because this, when we talk about AI and enterprise adoption, it is not going to be a one-to-many conversation. It has to be a one-on-one conversation. That's where we have very categorically defined a very strong structured demo framework for you, so that whenever you need some help, the person can come in. We have a very strong team at the back end sits, and then they can come out along on the sales calls to understand how really a consulting sales call works, how we can help you in terms of improving your adoption, having that ROI that you have already invested in something, how you can recover that ROI. So I think this is a very high level glimpse of the grid that I have developed here. If you can go on to the next slide, I think that's where I was just talking about that Copilot journey is very industry specific. In fact, I would say it's not agnostic of industry. It is completely industry dependent. So if you talk about healthcare, financial service, retail, manufacturing, legal, even an HR person in healthcare industry would have a different workflow or a different way of approaching people versus someone who is approaching or doing HR work into legal and professional services. And that's where I would say Adoptify AI comes into play, where we have a structured journey, we have course curriculum that are being developed across the board for every particular industry, and in that industry, how that particular job role has been impacted, how we can improve the people readiness, how we can improve the data readiness, and how we can adopt and adapt to Copilot as a whole. So I think just last question before I hand it over to you. If all of you have been, I can see no one has dropped from the meeting, hardly one or two people. That's a good sign. That means we are adding value to what you are doing today. If you can write on the chat, are you currently using Copilot? Yes or no? I think that would be a lot more helpful for us. If you are into a Microsoft ecosystem, you are into a Google Studio, Google ecosystem, or you're working on something very custom, it would be helpful for us to know that. That's my part of what I wanted to cover, Chintan. Over to you. And I hope this is what we wanted to talk about today.
Absolutely. So I'll wrap up the session with one of the most important point, like Rahul has mentioned. You don't need to more AI tools or the Copilot. You need more adoption, and then it starts with the knowing exactly where you are. Now it's extremely important. Knowing where you are is where we are going to start the journey with. So the next and most important step is to discuss, analyze, and understand and assess where we are, and then let us plan the journey that we can for you. That's what the goal is. The session, we actually have wanted to have you understand that adoption is not just a one-time game, it's a continuous journey. Adoption is not about the tools. Adoption is not only about the use cases. Adoption is not about only ROI. Adoption is a journey where you need to start something, and then you have to build a momentum, and then we need to keep momentum up so that we can literally plan it out. And one of the questions that we have is for financial service company, are the Copilot will help more and impactful? Actually, we are on the way to reduce the people cost. The answer is yes. Most importantly, the most importantly that the teams that you have it, how you can empower them. There are multiple use cases you can deploy in the financial services itself. There are a lot of administrative use cases you can literally deploy an organizational grade setup with a Copilot. As an Adoptify AI is a Microsoft service provider as well, we can connect you with the right TSPs to buy your Copilot licenses and understand the overall Copilot licensing cost journey. We can start from there as well. So to answer your question, Copilot will definitely going to be an impactful. The goal is to understand and plan it properly. So let's say which team you want to plan it out, right? What teams are going to be helpful? What kind of a data you are working on right now? Where the data is sitting? But yes, it is definitely going to be useful to plan the journey for the financial services. Rahul, you want to add up anything on that, please?
Of course, I mean, that's a very great question. Eric Chan, thank you for asking that. We have multiple clients in the finance segment. I think I can talk about the region very specifically, Singapore, Malaysia. Finance sector with respect to AI and blockchain is growing very, very fast. There are a lot of tools that are being developed. And to be honest with you, if you are looking for an answer, are Copilot or will Copilot be useful for us in the long term? The answer is, of course, yes, because we have been using it ourselves for the last, I would say, 3.5 years ourselves. And I think it really helps you building the right ideas. It helps you, in not just with your meetings, not just with your productivity, but it helps you to build a system which is very synchronous to AI language, because now people have started using AI language. People do not want to use very typically how we used to write emails back in 2014 versus how we write it today has changed a lot. I think Copilot on a very large scale from a finance perspective, yes, there are multiple use cases to it and it does help a lot. You need to know what license you need to purchase. There are very specific expert-led GPTs that are being developed by Copilot, which you need to purchase. That we will be able to guide it to you in our journey, because Adoptify also is a Microsoft partner in terms of distributing those licenses as well. So we'll be able to help you, Ilkam. I think it's a very great and fair question. You're on the right track and you're thinking in the right direction.
Any other questions? To sum up, I think we have discussed everything, like ready to build the overall plan. The most important part is the framework, the visibility, and the path forward. So, with that being said, thank you so much for the time, team. And it was an amazing discussion, Rahul. It was super insightful. Thanks, team, for setting up this entire session. And yes, we will follow up with all the details. Like I mentioned, adoption is a journey, it's going to be an ongoing process. And yes, we want to assist you as well you can. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Shri, you want to wrap up the session? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Chintan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chan, for sharing those insights and for this wonderful session, an experience-led session, I would say. And I would request our audience to please feel free to reach out to us if you have any more questions, any doubts, or if you would like to just, hop up and start with your AI journey with us. Also, the recording of the session and your participation certificates will be shared with you shortly after the session. Please be active on your emails. And yes, again, thank you once again, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.